Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 174 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Fia, and that is Gavin. And Gavin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. My back hurts, which, as I've learned from Bluey, just happens when you have a kid. That's just sort of a side effect of being a parent.
Bluey tells you this?
Yeah, so there's an episode where I've been watching a lot of Bluey. I'd say only about 20% for my baby. The other 80% is absolutely for me. If you've never seen Bluey, do yourself a favor. It's so good.
Okay.
But there's an episode where the dad mostly works from home, I guess. And for his computer chair, it's basically just like a big yoga ball, right? And so at one point the kids ask him, why is that your chair? They basically get him to goof off from work for the day by constantly stealing the yoga ball and doing various shenanigans with it. At one point they ask, why do you sit on that yoga ball? And he says, well, I threw out my back changing your nappies, which is what they call diapers over there. And yes, the parents are extremely relatable. Yeah, so as the good show Bluey tells us, being a parent just hurts your back. But anyway, I've been dealing with that for the last few days. I really should. I am gonna at some point ask if I can get a standing desk or a desktop adjustable size thing, because my desk itself is very not conducive to it's very big. It has built-in file cabinets and stuff, so that's just not a thing. But the adjustable topper thing is something I definitely want to look into. But anyway, this is a paleontology podcast. You'll notice we have one fewer host today. Mike was just feeling a little under the weather today, so it's just Fia and I, which is if we're usually down a host, it's usually Fia, because Fia's off doing cool grad school things. But today it's just us. So I'm sad that Mike's not here, but at the same time, I like hanging out with Fia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Because of that, we don't have a today in history or anything. And between you and me, Fia, I think we'll get into the content of the episode a little quicker today.
Okay.
I love Mike, but he the prelude to the actual meat of the show is it's a lot of Mike.
Yeah, and that's what brings character.
Absolutely, that's exactly.
Yeah.
But the beginning of this episode is going to be very Fia focused, I guess. I guess I could do the housekeeping because you had your
keep some house
seagrass corner. Yeah. So I'll do some sweeping and other vacuuming and stuff here. Don't forget to rate the show on whatever platform you listen to us on, and to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to give us feedback about the show and to suggest any future topics you'd like to hear about on the pod. If you would like to be a guest on the show, make sure to fill out our guest form, which can be found down in the show notes. As for next episode, it's an episode that ends in 5, which means it's not my job. Because it's an episode that ends in 5, it's Fia's job.
Yep. And
so Fia, granted, 2 weeks in grad school time is a long time.
Right.
So
I've got some ideas.
What are we talking about? Okay, if you got some ideas, you got some stuff brewing. If you don't want to share it with the class yet, that's totally fine.
No, I'm thinking that we'll probably talk about stable isotope analysis.
Ooh.
And kind of how stable isotopes work in ecology and how we can use that, to learn more things about the marine world.
Everything. You can use isotopes for so many things.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's awesome. And I'll have a good amount to just chit-chat to contribute to that one. Because in paleontology, we use isotopes for a ton of stuff too. Cool, so that'll be fun to look forward to in 2 weeks' time. Today, we're talking about the sounds in the animal kingdom, but real quick, before that, Fia, what's going on down in the seagrass meadow?
Yeah, so back in Seagrass Corner, I just want to share another organism that helps shape the hidden life of seagrass ecosystems. A family of amphipods I just recently learned about called Phleantidae. These amphipods, well, just amphipods in general, remember, are tiny crustaceans, kind of shrimp-like, but usually flattened from side to side, so they're like squished from their sides.
Right, instead of a crab being squished like top to bottom,
exactly,
like side to side.
Yeah. They're everywhere in marine systems, especially in seagrass beds, and they are a major link between primary producers and higher trophic levels because the amphipods will eat the grass, the epiphytes, the algae, and then larger organisms will eat the amphipods.
Yeah.
But yeah, specifically Phleantidae, what's weird about these guys is that even though I just said that the amphipods are flattened side to side, these ones are flattened top to bottom.
Oh.
Or scientifically dorsal ventrally. And it makes them look very much like a roly-poly isopod, but they are not.
Interesting.
Yeah, these are weird-looking guys. Another cool thing about them is that they are, they can range from bright to like a dark red, which is very uncommon for amphipods, which are usually like grayish, brown, like earth tones. Mm-hmm. These guys like really pop out. So, yeah, just another family, of amphipods living. They typically live in algae and in intertidal zones, and yeah, just adding to the list of how crazy amphipods are.
Yeah, and it's like the being squished, going from like amphipods being squished side to side to this particular group being squished like top to bottom. Like that doesn't sound like that big of a change, but like it would be like if instead of being like wider across the shoulders in humans, it would be like if we were wider front to back. Yeah. So just like imagine how much that would kind of change your life. Like, yeah. That would just change a lot and it's not just like, also part of being a parent. I got a little bit of a, not that I didn't before, a little bit of a belly. I'm also creeping on 30, so that's probably part of it. Yeah. And so, but it's like if you had like your bones were wider front to back than they were side to side, that would just change a lot of things about how we go about our day. Exactly. Yeah, so it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually, that's a pretty significant change in your body plan. Yep. Cool. Thank you for that, Fia. With that, we're going to sort of do a little bit of like a continuation on Fia's last episode, 165, about the oceans being real noisy. We're going to be talking about just animals making noise in general. Cool. Yeah, so animals, you might not know this, are often noisy. Yes. Depending on the time of year and where you live, it's often really hard to walk outside for even a few minutes without hearing, a bird chirping or a cicada in a tree droning or some other animal noise. Non-human animal noise. We'll mostly be ignoring human noise because it's very complicated and humans make a lot of noises. And this also kind of gets into like language territory that's also extremely complicated. So all of this, we're going to be talking about non-human animals. Fair enough. And so this whole field is called bioacoustics. Bio meaning life, acoustics meaning sound. We'll get into sort of exactly definitions and things in just a second here. But animals make noise for all sorts of reasons. If you've had a pet, you know this. They do it as a warning to get away from them, like a dog barking angrily or a cat hissing or something. They make sounds to attract mates. They make noise because they're excited or scared or content, like a cat purring, or depending on the group of animals, even to sort of see, quote unquote, when it's dark, like bats, or see things that are really far away, like dolphins with their echolocation, stuff like that. All sorts of different reasons for animals to make sounds. Both how the sounds are made and also how they're perceived are the things studied by the field of bioacoustics. Basically, it's the study of everything involving sound, the organs used to make it, the behaviors that prompt a creature to make a certain sound, the organs used by creatures to detect the sound, how they respond to the sound that they do perceive, and also all of the neurological pathways that make these various parts happen. So we're not going to be getting real in the weeds here. I am not a neuroscientist. One of the fun things about paleontology is that I don't have to learn as much about that because those don't leave fossils. So we're not going to be touching super deep onto the biochemistry of it all, but just a little bit. And so, also generally speaking, I didn't see this specified anywhere, but this is kind of the gist I got as well. So it also has a sort of qualifiers that it's generally only considering intentional noises. Like, for example, if a deer is walking in the woods and steps on a stick and breaks it, that is an animal making sound, but not really bioacoustics, right?
Right.
So let's take a good look at all of this through a really good example of a noisy animal, a frog.
Very noisy.
Very noisy. Famously, frogs croak. If you've ever seen any piece of media with a frog or toad in it, you've heard a frog croak. They do this for a variety of reasons. Mostly, it's males croaking to attract females and to tell other males how big and strong they are.
Checks out.
Yeah, frogs have an organ that most terrestrial vertebrates, or most tetrapods, so that's all the vertebrates, things with bones, that are not fish. So those would be amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Pretty much all of them have this organ called the larynx that most people would colloquially know as your voice box. That is kind of this area of the throat. If you put your fingers just gently on your throat while you're talking, the part that you can feel vibrating, that is your larynx. It's in this area of the throat that's really muscular and allows air to pass through it in specific ways as it's leaving the lungs. The larynx generally controls pitch and volume in animals that have one. So your speaking volume, that comes from your larynx. And then whether you talk like this or whether you talk like this, that's your larynx moving up and down in your throat. All the various sounds beyond that are made elsewhere in the mouth or throat region. The exception to that is birds. We'll talk about birds later. They still have a larynx, but we'll talk about birds more specifically later. In frogs, they are moving this air from the lungs through the larynx. The sound is then projected into a specialized vocal sac. That's the expandable part of the mouth under the chin that they blow up when they're croaking. So when you see a frog croak and they're, underneath their chin is this big bubble, that is an organ, a specialized organ called their vocal sac. This helps them shape the sound, so that sort of helps them make the sound that they want to make, and also amplifies the volume by quite a bit. It's like a little resonance chamber that makes it just much, much louder than it would be otherwise. And so, all things considered, frog sounds are relatively simple. Unlike the hundreds of different sounds that have come out of my mouth in the last few minutes of this podcast, frogs, at least each frog species, right, mainly has two types of calls. There's the first one, that you are probably most familiar with, if you think of like a bullfrog here in North America, or like tree frogs, the one that you're thinking of is a call that males use to attract egg-bearing females and also to threaten other males. To be like, hey, I'm here, I'm big, I'm looking for ladies. That's the first one and sort of the main one. The other main one is a call that males and non-egg bearing females use when a male tries to mate with them to tell them to get off.
Oh.
Those are kind of the two main frog calls that they do. They have other, little squeaks and things, but these are the main two.
Okay.
And so frogs, their sounds are so specialized that often the best way to know what frog species are in a given environment isn't to go out and find them, grab them in the pond and look, but it's to listen for their calls and to identify them that way. Because even very closely related frogs can have very different calls. In fact, and I think I've talked about this on the pod before, when I was in community college, this was a required part of my Intro to Vertebrate Anatomy course.
Oh, really?
As part of an exam, our teacher would play a frog call, and we would give the genus and species to get full credit. We'd get partial credit for a common name. And there were, because this was also part of my community college. Unfortunately, it has since been cut, but had a zookeeper degree program that focused on like native, like local wildlife, because they would do internships at like the local zoo that had a lot of local wildlife, and so they would basically use this as like their training for being able to like talk about local native wildlife,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think we had to learn like 15 or 20 of them. And then he would play somewhere between 5 and 10 of them as part of the exam. And that was part of our exam.
All right.
So I know most of the, at least like northern New York local frog species.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and so like they're all pretty closely related, but they all have very different calls.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might be that they sound kind of similar, but like the pattern is the same. Like like a bullfrog, you think it's just like the big like, but there might be one that does it like faster or does it longer. Little differences like that, or the bullfrog is in the same genus and pretty closely related to leopard frogs, which are considerably smaller. They have a much higher pitched call, but they're pretty closely related. And so there are all of these different... And the frogs in a given environment tend to be pretty, closely related to each other. So the best way, even for them to tell each other apart, is to listen to these calls so that they can find and mate with their own species.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
And so to round out this sort of example of everything that bioacoustics looks at, we have a male frog who decides to make a call, depending on if he's looking for a mate or telling another frog to get off of him. His brain tells his lungs and a variety of muscles like around the body to push the air out through the larynx, which needs to be stretched in a certain way depending on if they're making the mating call or the get off me call. And then the air goes into that special organ in the chin that amplifies the sound. That is half of the things that bioacoustics covers.
Yeah, it's a very complex category of stuff.
And so the other half is when something else hears that frog. Ideally, at least as far as this male frog is concerned, in an ideal world, only female frogs of the same species would hear that frog call. But that's not how the world works, right?
Right.
And so here's a variety of things that all kind of fall under the various interactions regarding bioacoustics. So a female frog of the same species might hear it and be interested and go to find that frog. So the hearing, the processing that it is my species, and then the processing, is that a good enough call for me to go pay him a visit?
Yeah.
That's bioacoustics. A female frog of that same species might hear it, think his singing voice is bad, and go to a different pond with better males. Same thing. Another male frog of the same species might hear it and think that they're bigger than the guy making that call and try to go find that frog and kick him out of the pond. Some males might hear it and think that guy's definitely bigger than me, so I should go find a different pond.
Oh.
A female of a different species of frog might hear it and not care because that's not my species.
Mm-hmm.
A predator, like a heron or something, or a snake. Snakes are a little weird. They hear kind of strangely, but a predator might hear that and be like, dinner. I'm going to go find that.
Yep.
A prey item, depending on the size of the frog, they can eat pretty big things. Might hear that and say, this is not really where I want to be right now. I'm going to go the other way. And then, debatedly bioacoustics, a human might hear it and go, neat. I didn't know we had that species of frog here. And go try to find it for fun.
Yeah.
Arguably, that would fall in the same predator category as far as the frog is concerned.
Yeah.
And so in each of those scenarios, the sound hits the hearing organ. Broadly speaking, it's similar, except for maybe the prey item if it's a bug or something. But then transmits that neurological signal to the brain that it heard this sound. The brain tries to figure out the direction and distance the sound came from, because that's a big part of hearing, is figuring out where the sound is. Recognize that it comes from that frog species, and then deciding what to do, what behavior to respond to that information with.
That's all
of that, bioacoustics.
Very true.
And so it gets a little more complicated, like I kind of alluded to there, with like non-vertebrate animals. They also make lots and lots of sounds without a larynx, such as crickets and grasshoppers, which basically rub their wings along ridges on their body like a washboard, called stridulation.
Oh my god, I was just about to say that. I was like, I know this word. It's stridulation.
Yeah.
Because crabs do it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very common in arthropods because they have these hard parts to rub together. And if you just make, like a washboard, if you just make ridges on it and have parts close enough together that you can rub them on each other, that you can make sound.
Mm-hmm.
Cicadas do it differently. They have a special organ called a timbal, made out of like a rubbery type of tissue called resilin. And they have two of these on their body, one on each side. And they basically have muscles attached to it. And they basically just flex and unflex those muscles really fast, like dozens of times a second or faster. As fast as possible. And that's what makes their sound.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's basically like a really, really fast maraca, almost. This also, like I said, isn't taking into account animals intentionally making sounds with things besides their bodies. Like, if you were to train a bird to ring a bell, like, the bird is making that sound intentionally, but usually to tell its trainer to give it food.
Yeah.
Is that bioacoustics? I could not find a very good answer. And even in a scenario that doesn't involve humans, chimpanzees or other primates often use like sticks or rocks to hit stuff like on purpose to make sounds, or even just like slapping their hands on trees or on the ground and stuff. I would assume that counts, but I don't think that is like lumped in with bioacoustics as often.
Yeah, probably not.
And so as you can guess, Very complicated.
Yeah.
There are tons and tons of animals that make sounds. Like, I would go as far as to say, like, 95% of animals make some kind of intentional sound.
I would believe that.
Like, oh, there are a lot of bivalves and stuff. I don't know. Do bivalves make, like, intentional sound? Because mollusks, I don't think, in general, particularly do, or, like, have a way to, really.
Yeah. I don't know, because I know that they have some sort of, like, hearing mechanism.
You know, that's fair. So whether, even if they're not making the sounds, they're still hearing sounds.
Right, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
and
still, I would
especially,
lump into bioacoustics.
yeah, so especially the aquatic ones, like, when your body is, with the exception of, like, bivalves with their fancy shells, but, like, gastropods, so snails and slugs, or cephalopods like octopus and squid, their body is, like, only kind of different than water. So, like, when sound goes through the water, I imagine that just jiggles their body in a way that they can kind of detect, right?
Yeah, probably.
This is just me doing free time, real time word association. And so, yeah, they're definitely still hearing it in a sense, and responding to it in some way. So then, yeah, they also fall in this category. But as opposed to, like, involving animals making sounds, I feel like it's mainly vertebrates and arthropods. I'm sure there are some, like, worms and stuff that do it too. But yeah, basically everything besides sponges, I would think, hears and responds in some way to sound.
Yeah. Probably so.
And a large part of those sounds are sounds that humans can't hear. Humans have a pretty good, all things considered, range of frequencies that we can hear. We can hear, generally, it shifts sort of throughout your life, but generally between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. And so this is basically how many times the sound wave goes up and down per second is 1 hertz. So 20 hertz,
yes.
Very, very low frequency. 20,000 hertz, high frequency.
Right.
And high, frequencies higher than 20,000 that humans can't hear are often called ultrasound. Lower ones below 20 that we can't hear are often called infrasound. And lots of insects especially, but also some vertebrates like bats, some frogs, make ultrasound that we cannot hear. We just can't hear it. So, like, they do make some sounds that we can hear. Like, you can hear bats, but their echolocation is ultrasound. We just can't hear that. Microphones, special microphones can pick it up, and then we pitch it down so that we can hear it.
Yeah.
But for example, some insects like katydids, they make sounds like well over 100,000 hertz, like 5 times higher pitched than humans can hear.
Yeah.
And they're just doing that all the time. We just can't hear it.
Is that like, sorry, I don't know if you know, but is it like the same as like what narwhals do?
So
like, aren't they also echolocators?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, narwhals fall in the same group as, like, dolphins. And so they're also doing some ultrasound. Narwhals are strange with what exactly they're doing with their tusk, their big horn.
Yeah.
But yeah, whales and dolphins in general, use it in a ton of different ways. They use it to talk to each other. They use it to see when they're in, like, because, if you go down shockingly shallow in the ocean, there's just no light anymore. So you need some other way to see.
Yeah.
And they also, some of the bigger ones, like orcas, could just scream and stun their fish and that they eat.
Oh, that's crazy.
They just let out a big like pulse of sound. And they can focus it like in a pretty specific spot. And they can just yell real loud and for a second or two just stun whatever they're trying to eat, and that's a very efficient way for them to hunt. I'm sure a bunch of other toothed whales do that too, like dolphins and all of their relatives. I'm sure a bunch of them use it in that way.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No. Meanwhile, on sort of the other end of the spectrum, crocodilians and elephants, but also baleen whales, so like blue whales, humpback whales and stuff, they communicate with very low frequency sounds because they travel much further. So like whales, you know, like the big whales, they can talk to each other like miles and miles apart.
Wow.
And with things like elephants, you know, less far because water just conducts the sound a lot better than air does. We'll talk more about that in a second. But elephants, they make such loud and low frequency sound that they like shake the ground, which other elephants, potentially a couple miles away, I think the estimate that I saw was like a little over 3 kilometers.
Wow.
Can hear, quote unquote, through their feet. They have very sensitive like pads on the bottom of their feet, and they can pick up these vibrations and hear their friends talking to them, you know, a couple kilometers away.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. And crocodilians, if you've ever seen a crocodilian in the water, like making the water dance across their back and stuff. Yeah. So that's accompanied by usually some sound that we can hear, but the sound that is loud enough to be vibrating the water like that is infrasound that we cannot hear. And that is usually them a male calling out for a lady.
Nice.
And so, yeah, this kind of introduces the concept that sound moves through different things besides air in different ways.
True.
So sound, more or less, is like a pressure wave. So imagine, was it like a Newton's cradle? Like the set of like balls on strings where you like take a ball at the end and you let it go and it knocks into the other ones, right?
Yeah.
Imagine sound kind of like that. Where when you talk, you make a pressure wave, and that pressure wave pushes various molecules in the air into other molecules. And so it physically pushes molecules into other molecules, which then pass on that energy and pass it on to further molecules. And that's why sound dissipates after a certain amount of time, because it's not like a perfect transfer of energy.
Yep.
And so that's why sound dissipates after a while. But if those molecules are closer together, that becomes more efficient and means the sound can travel further and louder. And the whole thing between being a gas versus a liquid versus a solid is that your atoms and your molecules are closer together as you get denser, right? So the molecules are closer in water than they are in air, and they're closer in, you know, rock than they are in water, right?
Yeah.
And this is how underwater sonar works, both in things like dolphin echolocation and also military sonar. Most bioacoustics research has been funded by the military, because once we started putting, you know, submarines and things in the water, and we wanted to try to use sonar, because we were like, oh, this should work here. Water's good at this. We realized how friggin' noisy the ocean was.
Yeah.
Because they would try to find stuff and they just get all this static back that they didn't know how to parse. And so the military was like, okay, we need to learn what makes what sounds under here so that we can learn what is just a fish chomping on some coral, you know, a little ways away, what's a whale a little couple miles away, and what's an enemy submarine.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so a lot of bioacoustics research has been funded by the military for that reason. And basically how it works in echolocation in the water, like more or less with bats and stuff too. But you send out a signal, and when it hits something, it bounces back to you, potentially from really long distances, based on like how quiet the sound is. So it's like you make the sound, so like you know how loud it is.
Mm-hmm.
By the time it gets back to you, how quiet it is tells you how far away the thing is. And this can basically, if there's, you know, say you're a dolphin and there's a shark beneath you and then just flat seabed. You shoot some noise down, it's dark so you can't see the shark. The sound from the shark will come back and hit you before the sound that like hits the seabed and then comes back. So you say, okay, now there's a shark this far beneath me. And also, you know, they can tell just from the shape of it that it is a shark, or at least something probably not friendly. Also, not going to go too much further into this. This is also kind of how we learned about earthquakes. Because earthquakes just send out giant sound waves more or less through the ground. But yeah, the ground, because the water is much more uniform than the earth tends to be, even though hypothetically rock should be a really good sound conductor, because it's often shifted and broken up, it isn't as good. But so that's why elephants are only, you know, a couple kilometers, whereas, you know, a blue whale can talk to another blue whale from tens of miles apart or more.
So wait, I don't really understand why though. Like
why what?
Oh, sorry, that like rocks are like solids are bad at.
So like in isolation, it should be good, right?
Yeah.
But because there are so many cracks and things in the earth, if the earth was just covered in like a single layer of like an orange, right? If the earth was like an orange and it had orange peel as like a single kind of rock, just like a shell around it, that would be great.
Right.
But because it's all broken up and potentially bent and curved and stuff, that just makes the sound refract in ways that make it worse at conducting than it should be in like an ideal world.
Yes. Okay. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And so, if you want to know more about the oceans and their noisiness, at least in sort of a case study, go back and listen to the last Fia Takes the Wheel, episode 165, for more about noisy oceans. There's lots of animals making all sorts of noise down there. But for our purposes here, we're staying mostly on the surface.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that's, again, with the case study of the frog, broadly bioacoustics. And, you know, when we're talking about living animals, we can go out and just sit and watch, you know. Frogs live a lot of places. So you can watch the frog and see, okay, it made that sound in response to this action from another frog. And then, you know, we can, you know, do different neurological studies. So we could say, okay, the, you know, nerve signal from the brain goes through this nerve that goes to the lungs to send out the air to start croaking. We could do all that wonderful stuff in modern context. Great. It takes some time and it's hard work, but it's doable.
Right.
With fossils, that's really, really hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so there have been many Google searches. For specifically dinosaurs. And we'll talk about dinosaurs in a second, but For the biggest issue really is that the larynx, so that part if you feel your throat while you're talking, the part that vibrates, that is almost entirely soft tissue and does not fossilize. So that makes it really hard to figure out the what kinds of sounds, because like the shape of the larynx can tell you a lot about what kinds of sounds an animal can make.
Okay.
But even if we don't have the larynx, there are some things we can still look at. The easiest example, when it is applicable, is we can look at the living relatives of the extinct animal. This is obviously much easier for some groups of animals than others. For example, mammoths probably just made the same or very similar sounds to our modern elephants.
Yeah, probably so.
You know, mammoths are more closely related to Asian elephants than Asian elephants are to African elephants. So, probably pretty similar to an Asian elephant.
Yeah.
It gets harder for others, such as a saber-toothed cat, for example, because they're not very closely related to any of our living cats. And also, today's cats, there's two main groups, basically the big cats, lions, tigers, leopards, jaguars, clouded leopards. Those are the big cats. And then all of the others make different sounds. The big cats have a larynx that lets them roar. The clouded leopards have never been observed roaring, but their larynx says that they should be able to do it. But the lesser cats, all the other ones, from house cats to lynx to mountain lions to cheetahs, they have a different larynx that does not let them roar like a lion or a tiger. It lets them purr. And so big cats evolved from these lesser cats. And so this sort of like purring style larynx is probably the default. But saber-toothed cats are not related to either group. They're pretty distantly related to all of our living cats. And so could they have roared, or were they purrers? We actually have some fossils that give us some evidence, but we'll get back to that in a minute.
Okay.
So that's, an example of an animal where we have some relatives, but not particularly close relatives. And then there's animals like dinosaurs, where, we have relatives, but if you're comparing like a triceratops, for example, not close. Not closely related to birds.
Yeah.
And also, birds are just so derived. They are so different from even dinosaurs that are like reasonably closely related to them, like a T-Rex, that it's hard to tell how useful that comparison is. It could be really useful, but it might not be, and it's really hard to tell.
A lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. And so, for example, earlier I mentioned that birds do have a larynx, but they also have something else. They have a different organ that they use to make their songs. And so the larynx is just kind of there. Like, the larynx serves other purposes besides making sounds. But that's the main thing we use it for. With birds, they have a totally separate thing sort of further down, like right at the top of their lungs, called the syrinx. That is totally unique to birds. Did dinosaurs have it? If some did, which ones? We've never found one in a non-bird dinosaur fossil. But that's kind of like saying we've never found a needle in a skyscraper-sized haystack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like the larynx, the bird syrinx is also soft tissue and incredibly difficult to fossilize.
Yeah.
People have used various combinations of like crocodilian sounds, because crocodilians are also like in the same broad group as dinosaurs and birds. For example, for some of like the really low frequency sounds, because there's also some birds that make sounds like that, like emus and ostriches have these kind of like deep bellows that they kind of make at each other too. So they've kind of like tried to do different combinations of crocodilian sounds and these other low frequency bird sounds to come up with what some dinosaurs like T-Rex might have sounded like. And like, it's probably not a terrible approximation, but there's just not a lot of like quantifiable evidence supporting it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is, looking at modern related organisms. That is one way we can try to figure out what extinct animals and fossil animals sounded like.
Yeah.
Another way is to actually look at the fossils that we do have, which are limited, but when we have them, they can be incredibly helpful. So there is a set of bones that make up a structure called the hyoid, or you'll sometimes hear it the hyoid apparatus, because there's a bunch of bones kind of like stuck together in a certain way that help support the tongue. So like muscles need to be anchored to something so that they have something to like flex against, right?
Yeah.
And so the tongue is anchored to the hyoid in the throat.
Okay.
There's other muscles and stuff that attach to the hyoid, but also the larynx is hooked onto the hyoid. These bones are very delicate, and they're also not attached to other bones. They're kind of just supported by muscles and themselves and ligaments and things. So they're not like tied into like your vertebra in your neck or like your clavicle, your collarbone or anything. They're just kind of free floating in your throat area.
Ew.
Yeah, no, it's kind of gross to think about.
Yeah.
But because of that, they very easily break or fall apart when an animal dies, which makes them pretty hard to fossilize. But that said, they do fossilize occasionally. So for example, we have fossilized hyoid bones from the La Brea tar pits that look a lot like the hyoid bones of big cats. And we also have a lot of saber-toothed cat fossils in La Brea. And so because of that, it's pretty reasonable to assume that these cats could roar similarly to modern big cats.
Okay.
So that one, with the saber-toothed cats, there is like a reasonable inference you can make that they probably could do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we also just get, not just hyoids, but just generally really good fossils in a variety of ways. So, for example, the earliest evidence we have of that special bird organ, the syrinx, is from a bird from the late Cretaceous, about 68 million years ago. That's basically kind of a duck or a duck relative. The fossil was preserved in like really fine mud, which is really great for making fossils. It basically preserved the whole body in 3D.
Wow.
Yeah. Which means with, technologies like CAT scans, we can get a 3D view of some of the soft tissue structures, such as the syrinx. And so, as it turns out, this almost 70-year-old or 70 million year old syrinx looks pretty similar in most ways to a modern duck syrinx.
Yeah.
That kind of suggests that the syrinx evolved quite a bit earlier in bird evolution, if it was already this like advanced 70 million years ago.
Right.
But how much earlier? Potentially within dinosaurs, non-bird dinosaurs. We just kind of don't know.
Right.
But this is, one thread of evidence being like, yeah, some of the dinosaurs closest to birds might have been able to sing like birds.
Yeah.
And then also, maybe some bony structures besides, the hyoid or other stuff like that, that just seem like they were used for sound in some way. The biggest example of this is the various head crests of dinosaurs like Parasaurolophus. This is Ducky from the Land Before Time.
Okay.
They had this big old, like, tube coming off the back of their head.
Yep.
This tube was filled with air sacs and tied into the sinus cavities. And so it really seems like these days the consensus is pretty clear that this was like a resonating chamber for them to just make really loud, really low frequency sounds so that travel long distances.
Yeah, that makes pretty solid sense to me.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of debate over, whether it was some kind of like ornamentation, like was it for display or something? Or other people have suggested it was they had just like an exceptional sense of smell because this whole thing was their sinus.
Yeah.
But as we'll talk about in just a sec, we have evidence that actually suggests against that. And people have also done models and like computer studies, or even just like made replicas and just blew a bunch of air through it and saw what happened.
Right,
it's really good at making just like a really deep, resonating sound. Just that shape.
That's so cool.
Yeah. This also, the sort of idea of like bones telling us this applies to like early forms of whales and dolphins. Probably would apply to bats too if we had any good bat fossils. But dolphins have a very unique anatomy that lets them use their echolocation. If you've ever seen a dolphin's skull, it looks insane. Because that big, like, bulbous part on their forehead, there's no bone in that at all. That is all just like a big ball of jelly.
Yep.
And so they use that. They have muscles and air cavities in it to sort of flex it so that they can kind of shape the sound and focus the sound where they want. Kind of like that frog vocal sac we talked about. They then hear, so they blast the sound out through that, and they can focus it like really broad or really on one specific spot. And then when the sound comes back, they hear through their lower jaw, which has a cavity in it that's also filled with jelly that absorbs the incoming sound waves. And by looking at the fossils, you can look at the development of, like, the skull being a weird shape because there was the big jelly sac on the head, or the jaw being kind of empty in the middle to be filled with jelly. You can see, like, the steps of that happening. And it seems like about 28 million years ago is when we think they probably could have done echolocation. And then lastly, a little bit of less direct evidence, because like those two things, it's in the bone. It's hard to see what else they could be used for. Less direct, you have to make a couple more steps, but we can look at the brain cavity if we have a good enough skull. And you can look at which areas of the brain are more or less developed.
Really?
Yeah. So in a lot of animals, we can get a pretty good, like, general shape of the brain if we have a skull that's well preserved. Especially, like I said, with those like CAT scans or CT scans. If you have a good enough skull, you can basically make a 3D model of the brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so by looking at which parts of the brain were bigger, because at least in vertebrates, whether you are a fish or a human, generally speaking, the same parts of the brain do the same thing.
Yeah.
And how big they are relative to the total size of the brain generally tells you how important that thing is to that animal.
Yeah.
And so if you look at, the part of that regulates hearing, that is part of, why people were like, okay, it's probably not smelling for Parasaurolophus with its giant sinus because, the scent part of the brain was not very big, but the hearing part of the brain was pretty big.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And this kind of thing also is like, for example, how we estimate, different things like Tyrannosaurus had an excellent sense of smell.
Okay, yeah. Look, by looking at their brain.
Exactly. So that we can do this for lots of different things, but in this case, specifically hearing. There's not a single part dedicated to making the sound. So this doesn't tell us how important making the sound was, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if hearing is really, really important to you, and you don't live in a place like, if you're not a cave species where you're blind, if hearing is that important to you, that probably means that either you were nocturnal, which very well could be, or you were making a lot of sound. And so that it's important for you to hear others of your species making sounds as well.
Right.
And so that's kind of the point to end on here. This was a kind of long and windy episode, but I could go on for days about sound and how complex it is.
Yeah, there's so much.
Yeah, like I said at the very beginning, we completely skipped anything about humans.
Yeah.
Or let alone the potential for like language in non-human species. Language itself is a very convoluted thing. In humans, when we can talk to each other and learn about it, let alone things that we can't talk to.
Right.
And so just in general with, bioacoustics, as with a lot of things in paleontology, we have ways to get good estimates and inferences, but at the end of the day, that's kind of all we got for a lot of things, unfortunately.
Yep.
But yeah, so that has been episode 174. Do you have any last comments or questions or anything for you?
No, that was awesome. It's really cool to just think about sound in the context of paleontology, and pretty cool.
Well, thank you. I think it's cool to have it in like a grounded way, because like you are participating in bioacoustics currently, dear listener. So in a way that's like how we make these inferences and things in paleontology that like a lot of people who like in bad faith say paleontology, they're all just making guesses. There's no way they could possibly know these things. Where it's like, any paleontologist who's, honest will say, a lot of it is, guesses with evidence, with support. But a lot of it is just, this is what logically makes the most sense based on our understanding of how modern things work and our previous things that we've figured out. And this is the best we got. And any good paleontologist will tell you that.
Yep.
But
totally agree with you.
Without Mike here to send us off, this has been episode 174 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. I have been Gavin. That has been Fia. We will be back with you in 2 weeks for a Fia Takes the Wheel. Until then, take care, everybody. This episode of I Wish You Were Dead was written by Gavin Davidson and hosted by Gavin Davidson, Mike Bryson, and Fenella Campanino. It was sound edited and edited for YouTube by Gavin Davidson. Special thanks to former guests of the pod and to listeners like you.